It's clear that the conference today is extremely timely, addressing one of the most important bilateral relationships in the world and the multifaceted nature of this relationship during a period of change in both countries. I believe that through the ongoing engagement of the U.S. China Institute and the individuals we have gathered here today, we have the ability to address in a constructive and positive manner the rising challenges that face the U.S.-China bilateral relationship. Now, despite the recent global turmoil currently facing financial markets, rising economic prosperity has created unprecedented economic opportunities in the two most dynamic countries of the Pacific Rim. The U.S. is the world's largest economy, and China as the world's largest emerging economy. Yet this prosperity has come at a high cost in rising energy demand and growing environmental damage. The increasing awareness of these costs in both the United States and China has led to recognition that there is no greater public policy question facing our two countries than the energy and environmental challenges that we jointly face. The scale and scope of the challenge facing both the United States and China in the areas of energy and the environment are enormous. The United States is the world's largest consumer of energy and is also the world's largest consumer and importer of oil. By some measures, until recently, the United States was the world's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. Yet in all of these measures that gauge the scope of the energy and environmental challenge, China has or will soon eclipse the United States. Although China's economy is just 1/6 the size of the U.S. economy, China by some measures has already overtaken the United States as the world's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. With China's economy growing at an average rate of 8% annually, its economic rise is being fueled by a rapid increase in energy consumption. Coal remains China's primary source of energy, supplying nearly 70% of its energy needs, and domestic demand for energy has made China the world's largest producer and consumer of coal. Although China contains only 13% of the world's proven coal reserves, over the last decade it has been responsible for nearly 40% of global consumption. What does that mean? In 2007, China added 95 gigawatts of electricity generation capacity. That's roughly half of California's total electricity consumption last year. Now, in the last decade, China has also nearly doubled its oil consumption to become the world's second largest consumer of oil. Much of this growth has come from China's transportation sector. In 2006, China became the second largest global market for new vehicles, and within the next decade, it's estimated that China will become the world's largest new vehicle market. As the world's largest consumers of energy and the world's largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, the United States and China have a mutual interest in jointly tackling the global energy and environmental challenges that have resulted. This rationale has given rise to the cooperation on energy and environment that the United States and China have established through a number of bilateral mechanisms. Foremost among these bilateral mechanisms has been the Strategic Economic Dialogue, or SED. Created 2 years ago in September of 2006 by President Bush and President Hu, the SED has allowed both countries to address the long-term strategic economic questions that both countries face. Consistent with this shared vision for the SED, the twin challenges of energy and the environment has emerged as one of the major areas of discussion between the two countries. Since the creation of the SED, we've reached a number of agreements that further energy and environment cooperation. These agreements include joint efforts to increase industrial energy efficiency and a joint 5-year commitment to promote large-scale deployment of alternative fuel technologies for vehicles. We've also signed a memorandum of understanding to combat illegal logging and promote sustainable forest management. And we've launched efforts to help China develop a nationwide program for sulfur dioxide emissions trading, modeled after our own program here in the United States. Each of these agreements has served as a foundation for what has come next, the 10-year framework for energy and environment cooperation, a comprehensive framework for addressing our shared energy and environmental challenges. Announced at the third SED in December of 2007 and signed at the fourth SED this past June, the 10-year framework is a collaborative effort to, quote, advance technological innovation, facilitate the adoption of highly efficient, clean energy technology and technology in addressing climate change, and promote the sustainability of natural resources, end quote. Now, with the 10-year framework, the United States and China are addressing the shared commitment that both countries have to achieve balanced economic growth, along with energy security and environmental sustainability. And under this framework, our two governments at the highest levels have identified specific areas of cooperation to focus our collective interagency efforts in both the United States and China. These efforts are focused on shared objectives in 5 initial areas: electricity generation, transportation, clean water, clean air, and wetlands and protected areas. Now, the 10-year framework is intended to augment through supportive and complementary efforts, but not replace, multilateral climate change negotiations being held under the auspices of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. These multilateral climate change negotiations are being actively supported by a parallel effort initiated by President Bush called the Major Economies Process. In addition to these efforts, the Treasury Department has led the creation of a new international clean energy technology fund at the World Bank to help confront climate change worldwide. This fund, a multi-billion-dollar global effort, is aimed at enabling the deployment of cleaner, more efficient technologies in developing nations by helping to close the financial gap that exists between current industry practices and advanced technology available today. In drawing distinctions among these efforts, it's helpful to think of the 10-year framework as the means to build capacity and address challenges that both the United States and China face today in meeting its current goals. Specific questions that the 10-year framework will address, demonstrating how these efforts will jointly benefit the United States and China, include: how do both countries increase market access to environmental goods and services? How do we share the costs associated with the development of advanced technologies that may be out of reach today, such as carbon sequestration? How do we jointly meet our energy goals, increase energy security, and reduce our dependence on foreign oil? How do we ensure that our water is clean and safe to drink, and our air clean and safe to breathe? And how do we incentivize cooperation to achieve technological advances and solutions to our problems that today we might not be able to imagine? Answers to each of these questions may be different for our two countries, yet our approaches to finding answers are shared: to ensure the implementation of proven and effective policies, to provide education allowing individuals to make environmentally sound decisions, and to increase the affordability of new or existing technology by reducing market access barriers. Now, efforts to implement the 10-year framework are ongoing, and both countries are actively working on developing shared action plans in the 5 targeted areas of cooperation that allow for both countries to mutually benefit from shared cooperation. Short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals are being established by both of our countries. And although these action plans will be living documents, it is our goal to have 5 action plans completed and agreed to by the governments of both countries by the next SED in December. In addition to the development of action plans under the 10-year framework, last June's SED resulted in an agreement to actively explore the development of eco-partnerships as a vehicle for implementing and developing cooperative energy and environmental initiatives. Targeted at the subnational level, eco-partnerships represent voluntary, cooperative partnerships taking numerous forms, including government-to-government partnerships at the local and state or provincial levels, business-to-business partnerships, university-to-university partnerships, nonprofit-to-nonprofit partnerships, or any combination of these organizations or governments. For the Chinese, eco-partnerships has been loosely modeled after the special economic zones created in the 1980s, where economic reform policies could be tested in targeted areas such as Shenzhen and Hainan province before introduction to the whole of China. We bring to eco-partnerships a similar vision for energy and environmental innovation and policies. Potential eco-partnerships are currently being discussed with the Chinese government, with both countries envisioning the establishment of a minimum of 3 eco-partnerships by the next SED in December. Although specific details may change, one eco-partnership being actively discussed involves the city of Greensburg, Kansas. On May 4th, 2007, Greensburg was nearly completely destroyed by an F5 tornado, averaging of 200 miles an hour, with winds averaging about 200 miles an hour plus. In the aftermath of this disaster, Greensburg made a commitment to rebuild in an environmentally sustainable manner, with all buildings built to LEED Platinum standards. In addition to a redevelopment plan based upon environmental sustainability, Greensburg is actively working to create a new model for economic development based upon green business and industry. Greensburg is in the process of establishing an eco-partnership with a town in Sichuan province that was devastated by the earthquake in May 2008, focused on environmentally sustainable redevelopment and green business development. As both our countries begin to implement the 10-year cooperation framework, we recognize that this effort will span 3 different presidential administrations in the United States and 3 5-year plans in China. To ensure the longevity and continued relevance of these efforts to both countries, we have worked to develop the 10-year cooperative framework, including goals and an organization that is both durable and sufficiently flexible. Both the United States and Chinese governments are hard at work implementing this vision, and both countries have already established cabinet-level steering committees to guide these efforts. For the United States, this steering committee is led by the Treasury Department, with active participation from the Department of State, Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Commerce. For China, this steering committee is led by the National Development and Reform Commission, with participation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the recently created Ministry of Environmental Protection. As we've learned from the strategic economic dialogue, and as each of you can imagine, the success of an initiative spanning over 10 years is largely dependent upon early efforts to ensure that expectations between our 2 countries are clearly defined and initial concerns are addressed immediately. Our initial joint efforts have been focused in this way. These first steps represent some very promising progress, yet we can all recognize that the energy and environmental challenges that both the United States and China face cannot be solved tomorrow, let alone in the short run. Rather, over the long run, a meaningful impact upon these challenges will require ingenuity, commitment, and dedication of leaders from government, business, the scientific community, and others who are dreaming of tomorrow's breakthroughs. It is my hope that our cooperative efforts will ultimately succeed in addressing our joint energy and environmental challenges by producing breakthroughs that will transform the economies of the United States and China for years to come. Thank you so much.